All right, I'm gonna let everybody in.
Hi, guys.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Achieving Generative Leadership Through Human Source Value Curve training today, hosted by the National Community Action Partnership. Just as a nice quick tech reminder, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to work with you. Or if you have any issues getting on here, let me know. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Taylor Daniel.
Wonderful. Thanks, Peter. So we like to start all of our meeting by centering ourselves in the promise of community action. And it reads as thus. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves community, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. In all of our meetings, we also like to do a land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence to the vitality to generations around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led us to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land and had on this land for generations, for more generations that can be counted. So we welcome you all to acknowledge where you are joining this meeting from. For me, this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Nacotec people. I'm based in DC, and I pay my respects to the elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land throughout generations. So I think my colleague Peter will put that link in the chat so you can join us in your land acknowledgement as well. So today we are joined by three great folks. We have Liz Kuapala from Mojave Aqua. We have Mia Harnels from Wayne Metro and Jennifer Kerr from APHSA. And then I believe I will be passing it off to Mia.
We don't hear you, Mia. I think, Tina, are you sharing the slides? If you want to pop the slides up, we'll get going. And Mia, when you get your sound sorted out, you just let us know and we'll turn it over to you. I want to just welcome people. My name's Liz Kuapala. I want to start out by saying Liz Kuapala, Indigenous Cause, Iron Range, Indunjaba, Earhart Inda, Gawin Indigusi, Gawin Indodimsi. I introduced myself in the language of the Ojibwe people, not because I'm Ojibwe myself, I'm not, but I work in on lands that have been stewarded by the Ojibwe people for generations and continue to be. Happy to be here with you today. So today we're going to talk through the human services value curve, and we welcome you here. Encourage you to put in the chat, if you will. Let me see, just maybe your name, where you're joining us from, yeah, and something you hope to learn today in the chat. That'd be great.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can. Mia, I'll turn it back to you, and I think.
Yay. Okay. So, so good afternoon. Grateful to be here. I'm Mia Harnels. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Wayne Metro, coming to you from Metro Detroit, the Motor City. It's sunny and bright here today. We do have a lot of native land still here on the Detroit River in Wyandotte, Michigan. That is where I'm at today. and all along the river are still places where we can go and visit. There are sacred grounds that remain intact here in Southeast Michigan for us, which is a gift. So today is really mine and Liz's first Human Services Value Curve training together. We've had a lot of fun presenting at conferences in the past, but this is really the first time. This is kind of our maiden voyage. So thanks, partnership, and Denise for bringing us together. So over a collective maybe 40 years experience between Liz and I think what we've learned is that in order to build well-being from the ground up, communities have to be bright, vibrant, and inclusive of all people, where families can live, learn, work, and play and connect. So basically living out that promise that we just heard. All the sectors, the public, the community, they have to come together to co-create solutions side by side alongside those we serve. Why? Because this really is what enables us to prevent problems before they occur and address root causes of community level changes. And here for us, I think Liz would agree that the pandemic really has revealed where our systems are super stretched and very frayed. So it's really showing us that interconnectedness of supports that all people and communities need. So at our best during COVID, this vision was really reflected in some rapid adaptations and coordination of public and nonprofit sectors that we did here on the ground in Detroit and Liz did with her teams. Physical, social, and emotional well-beings whose families were disrupted. Yet the ongoing disparities of response and recovery still highlight that we have a lot to do to be more equitable and resilient. And I want to share with you why we need to be this way, about a story of Juanita Gardenshire and her 5 boys. Who's going to roll that for me? I'm not hearing sound. I feel like we need to do the plug-in with YouTube or shift over from your microphone to your speakers.
I can try to turn that up there. Give me a sec. Okay, let's try this again. That work? Okay.
We could keep going if you guys want to kind of, Peter, if you want to work through that.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll see if I can get some solutions going to that if you want to.
All right, so let's put up slide 3. And we told people if you would kind of put your name, your role, and what you were hoping to come and learn here today in the chat, we can kind of understand who our audience is and really, I think, speak to your roles throughout the presentation. At this point, I believe I turn it over to Liz, who's going to introduce herself and the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you, Mia. So I am so excited to see a little bit of what you're hoping to get and a real range of folks popping up in the chat. People were like, brand new to this, but I'm here for anything that will help my community. I love it. Welcome. Happy you're here. To folks who are, maybe a little bit more familiar and looking to how to apply this. So wherever you're coming to us from geographically and your knowledge of the human service value curve, it changed my life. When I first learned about it, I told our team, I want to get this tattooed on my body because on the inside of my eyelids, really, so that I think about it all the time. So today we're going to start with just a high level overview of the human service value curve. We're going to dig in a little bit and share some examples. And then we're going to break into groups and really talk about, give you tools on how to apply this, what we talk about today, apply it to your work so that you can put it to work right away. So we're happy you're here. Keep checking in on the chat. Would love that. And I want to pass this over to my colleague, Jen Kerr, who is with the American Public Human Service Association and kind of co-sponsor of this event today, and a leader in this work. So Jen's going to give us a high-level overview of the Human Service Value Curve. Take it away, Jen.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, me, and very honored to be co-presenting with you all today and having the opportunity again to meet so many phenomenal staff, once again, representing community action agencies. So what is the Human Services Value Curve? So the value curve is a lens, and it's a lens to look at stuff from the consumer or individual's point of view. The value curve should not be one more thing. It's not an additional framework you have to use. It's not an additional method or way to do something. It really, truly is a lens to look at all of the work that you're currently doing or that you are hoping to do. The value curve was developed through Harvard University's Leadership for a Network World about 10 years ago, and it was developed in partnership with human services leaders across the country, right? And so really helping with that transition to really look and plan our service delivery and our work from the leadership level down to the family or individual level or grassroots level up. So Tina, as you go to the next slide, I did see a question, and yes, after everything is over, either I think Peter will send an email out and you will have the deck and handouts and all of that great stuff for you. All right, so how do we use the value curve? So when I talk about our current state, that's where are we now, right? And so taking a look at that, and then where are we now? We always think about where do we want to go? And the value curve for me, this is where kind of it became life-changing for me, is this is how I kind of frame my basics or change management pieces. The value curve is a way to look at things on how to get from where we are now to where we want to go. And again, that's individually, per unit, per department, per program area, or per system or community. So it can be utilized in many, many different ways. Tina. When we think about the value curve, some of the things that distinguish it is that the value curve focuses on service, customers, and impact versus program and benefit. So we're not just looking how many services are offered or how many families participated in blank service or blank program area, but we're looking at the impact the program has had on the community, on the system, on the family as a whole. We're also, with the value curve, thinking about that transition from outputs to outcomes. And one of the ways I always kind of share about this is that I always hope, and what helped through the lens of the value curve many years ago is that the budgets that I'm developing, they're driven by the services that are needed by the families within the communities. We're not offering services to families based off of the budget I have. So they are driving kind of the cost, the services, the program areas, and so on. So what is the value curve? And I always laugh because the value curve really is not a curve. And so the value curve is a way that human services leaders have determined to look through effectiveness in achieving outcomes as well as efficiency in achieving outcomes. The value curve has 4 progressive lenses, and the first being regulative, moving on to collaborative, integrative, and generative. Passing it right back on.
Excellent. So we're going to work through each of these lenses as Jen described. And I think let's just move to the next slide and we'll take these one at a time. So the first lens, starting in the bottom corner, is this regulative lens. And so this is where we're really thinking about our work from a place of, getting our reports done, making sure the funding works, the documentation is sorted out. We're focused in the regulative lens, in the regulative business model. We're focused on efficiency and accountability and proper use of funds. And we know in community action, there's so much of that. What I like to think when I talk about this with our team is in the regulative model, if you go to your favorite national park, so, for me, it's Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon, and there's speed limit signs as you're driving down those roads, and it says like speed limit 15 or speed limit 30. If when you're in the park, if you don't follow those speed limit signs, you could get hurt or hurt other people. And on the flip side, if that's all you focus on, like if you're just focused on your speedometer, like, okay, it's speed limit 15 here, so I'm gonna 16, 14, 16, 15, 15, I've got it 15, 15, 15, 16, oops, 14. If that's all you do, you won't get arrested, and that's great. But there's also like a lot of opportunity. And so when I first came to this, I was so excited that there's other ways to look at our work as well. And so the regulative lens is really important. It's the foundation to keep us in compliance and make sure that we're delivering effective and efficient services. Next slide. As we go up the value curve, that's not a curve, we come to the collaborative business model. And this is where we're really working for a single door approach. We're trying to figure out, how do we take all of the services we have, make them work together in the best interest of the program participants. So some of our like whole family work, some of those things come into this, where we're no wrong door, single door approach, coordinated entry, some of those strategies. In my analogy of going to the national park, in a collaborative model, we might think about, as we're going to the park, who do we bring with us? Who's in the car with us? And, do we have seatbelts for them if they're little, or car seats or whatever? But we're thinking about who are we partnering with to best serve the interests of our program participants. Next slide. Next up the value curve is the integrative business model. And so this is, let me just find my notes here. This is when we're really starting to look at the root cause of issues faced by our participants. So it's not just, in community action, we talk about, we have three main goals. One is to provide services to people. Another is to address the conditions in the community that allow poverty to exist in the first place. And so we talk about being backbone organizations and what's our role in changing the conditions in the community that allow poverty to exist, and getting at some of those root causes, the childcare crisis or the affordable housing crisis or some of these things. How do we get at that? And it's a core part of what we do. Of course, we have to do things in a regulated way, make sure we're in compliance, make sure we're developing those partnerships inside the organization and external to the organization, the collaborative model, but also that we're kind of looking at the root cause. And let's head over to generative next. Generative is we're really looking at the big picture. So beyond an individual family's experience or the childcare situation, like what do we want the communities we look like? I mean, what the communities we live, work, and play in, what do we want them to look like? Let's put ourselves sort of in the driver's seat of that, putting the families centered and helping them, just imagine the world we want to create together. And so with that, we're really looking at systemic barriers. We're looking at inequality, diversity, equity, inclusion. The part of it has to be in this generative space where we're really looking at new ways, new systems, new ways of doing things. And I think I'll leave it there and maybe see, Peter, if we can try the video again, and then I'll pass it back to Mia.
Sure, we can give this another shot real quick. Okay, I believe this should work. You just let me know though, okay?
My name is Juanita Gardenhire. I have 5 children, 5 boys, aging from 18 to 3, and they all have been through the Wayne Metro school system. And they pretty much all had the same teachers too, which is, I guess, a blessing to me because, you know, they know our family. Once I had the triplets, of course, things got a little bit harder. The father passed away last year of COVID, and even though my oldest sons were out of school at that time, they still reached out, you know, they were still there, you know. Wayne Metro is kind of like family to us. So when I drop my kids off to the teachers, I know that I'm dropping them off to family. Another thing that I just truly appreciate about Wayne Metro is the fact that my second oldest son, he has mild autism. And I just started noticing things, but I just didn't know what to do. So I got to Wayne Metro, and that's when she introduced me to the Children's Center. And she was like, get him in there so that he can start evolving. And he just turned 13 the other day, and he has, when I say he has made a complete 360, to the point where now, if he's in the car with me, he'll take the kids up to the, you know, to the door, and he'll come pick them back up, you know. And to me, that's a lot of responsibility. I've always been an advocate for Wayne Metro, and even when I knew I couldn't be there, I would even take, like, you know, their flyers and things like that. It's always ways to get the word out, you know. It's always awesome for somebody to recognize that you are doing your best. You're trying, you're going above and beyond to try to make things happen, not just for your family, but other families as well. It's a blessing.
Well, thanks for helping to play that. You know, when I saw that, it just, again, you know, we just recently played and created that video for an engagement series that, you know, we did with the community champions. And, you know, when you see that video, you understand why we have to do the work in this way that kind of Liz has, you know, kind of started to explain. So we're going to align now. We're going to talk about aligning the value curve with community action agencies. We're going to flip it. So, you know, we're going to start again with the regulative in that corner. So, you know, when you think regulative at your shops, think about, you know, when you're like, if regulative is your value right now, that is your value statement, that is where you're valuing most of your staff, this is what you would say. We had no findings or disallowed costs in our audit, again, for the umpteenth year. Yay. Man, we spent every single dollar of every utility assistance funds that came in. We spent them on time, and again, no disallowed costs. We hit our weatherization unit goals. Woo-woo. Our class and core data are within the national range. You might have a tight employee handbook, and your infrastructure is probably really tight and really strong so that you can build. If you fit that model, you are kind of in the regulative space. Tell me other ways that your organization shows up in the regulative space with excellence. Because there is, being regulatively excellent is a gift. So anyone want to talk about ways that you believe that your agencies are, put them in the chat, and that we can kind of dig into it when we're in our group sessions. Any other ways regulative shows up in your agencies? Pathways to excellence standards, yep. Performance standards. Anything else? Your reports are in Roma goals, right? You don't miss a report. You don't have to ask for extensions, right? You're not asking for waivers after the fact, all that stuff. Staff are certified. Yep. The funders are happy. Okay, you've gone through some kind of review council. You're compliant with all the regs. Okay. That only then are you ready, and I think it's responsible then to really then be brave enough to go to the next level, which is the collaborative space. And so when you think about being collaborative in a community action agency, you're working together now. You're not just doing one thing, checking the box, woo woo. You are working across programmatic teams. You are removing barriers to accessing services. So if you say things like, man, one service at a time, that is not how we do things anymore. We will no longer be okay with bringing folks into our centers and the only thing they get is one thing, okay? You will say that the cylinders of excellence that you have created are all of those really high, tall, strong silos where everything's done really neatly in a row, that is no longer acceptable. That you have to, the cleanness of that is not where we play in the human services space. And then you would also say things like, man, my staff are really aware of the full array of services that we offer as an organization. And they're really open and purposefully working to communicate across departments with external stakeholders. And with external stakeholders. So if you're hearing that your staff, your leadership, your teams are like, hey, yeah, I'll work with other people, I'll go across departments, you are in a collaborative space. What are some examples of things that you do as an agency that show that you are working in the collaborative space or that you've kind of arrived in that realm, you think? So for an example for us, we have done some partner granting where we take CSBG and we have done some very small pots of money and residents actually help us to score RFPs for small mini grants. So we're working collaboratively with these organizations. We are granting them dollars and we are making sure regulatively that they can, that they're spending accordingly. What gets interesting is when we start kicking it into gear in the integrative space, which is next. But collaboratively means you're working side by side. Everybody knows everybody, everybody's cool, they're playing nice. Offer total menu of services to all. There you go. Having integrative technology support no wrong door, correct. So if you're saying as a system, no matter where you come in the system, that we'll still work together. Our systems aren't really talking, like we can't like pull and push data, and we're not like, you know, doing all that stuff, blending and braiding funding yet, but we are aware and purposeful about doing things together instead of separately. That is correct. Anyone else have any examples? All right. let's go to integrative. Let me go to my integrative spot. So when you are an organization that is integrative, you transform casework to practice. There's family engagement, there's flexibility, there's moving towards early intervention. So we completely changed everything. I mean, our hours are now Monday to Saturday. We're open weekdays till 7 and Saturdays, 9 to noon. That's what our families told us. It took us, time to get there, but we made a commitment to do that. Like, this is transformative. So why did we do that? Because that's what the data told us. That's what people said that they needed. That's what our community needs, the real-time needs that were coming our way. So if you are aligning the value curve and working in an integrative space, you are including the involvement of additional state, local, and community-based partners. And this is where with Gen and with Kresge Next Gen and the Detroit Next Gen and the Human Services Value Curve, this is where it became super transformational. This because we got really honest about putting people first. We became a very open book, and we put ourselves out there and unpacked decades of all of these rules and recommendations that are compiled from auditors and monitors over years and years. And we said, we will never make it if we try to continue to live this way in this regulative space forever. So we said, let's make it simple, let's clean it up, let's make it easy, let's make it inclusive, and let's dump all that old other baggage and design for what people in the data are telling us that they need. So casework and insights is where integrative work gets into moving things forward. Any examples, guys, of integrative work or projects that you are working on or utilizing in your communities? So, like I said, I'm just going to jump in. Unless Liz wants to jump in at some point, or Jen, or anyone. I mean, if you guys want to go off mute, that's cool too. But when I said about funding organizations, letting residents lead those organizations, bringing resources to the table and capacity, that wasn't enough. That's collaborative. What we did then was we plunked one of our 900 staff. So there's like probably about, at any given time, 70 staff kind of rotating in and out of these community-based organizations. And you can't help but fall in love, right? So that's integrative. That's, you're there, you're in, and you're making it all work. Liz, Jen, any comments?
I just see a note here in the chat. Someone saying it'd be helpful to leave the slide up even when we're talking about it so that people can see it a little bit more. I wanted to mention that, Mia talked about meeting all of those regulative pieces is important. And I would say, like, especially as we move into these collaborative and integrative, it becomes clear why it's so important that we're not, weighed down by a bunch of audit findings and we have to know our programs and know how to use them so we know how to change them and advocate. And I know Wayne Metro is always talking with their funders about, hey, here's a way we could live outside of the box. What do you think about this? And can we do that instead of like, we have to only do it this way? I thought too, many of us have Head Start programs. And back in the day when we first moved, a lot of us have Head Start programs, classrooms right in the school buildings. And so I think as we think about that has potential to be a regulative where we're just like in the space and we're, or it could be collaborative because we're finding ways to collaborate. And I really do think that same idea of being Head Start classrooms, being in elementary school buildings, so that someone's ready to move into kindergarten and they see what that's like. There's some real intention that can happen in that same example. So I think there's ways to take the same example and think about how are we operating this from a regulative? How are we operating it from a collaborative? How are we operating it from an integrative? And then one other thing I want to say too, that for me, I feel like also helps. All of us go to a ton of meetings. And when you think about a meeting you go to, or a meeting maybe you run, or a meeting you require, you're required to attend, and just how that meeting, the exact same meeting, can be done from a regulative space, we show up and we listen and we even participate and we get stuff out of it. It could be shaped in a very collaborative, you know, is the agenda being written by one person in one organization, or is it kind of the mission and stuff being co-developed? You know, integrative, are we forward looking and, you know, involving our consumers, clients, customers in the work? So I feel like anything we do, we could look at the different aspects to see how are different parts of the value curve showing up, or how could they? That's all I got, Mia.
Well, that's a lot. So thank you for that. The next, so like the generative is really, to me, you know, and Liz and I keep saying me, and I want to say we more, but you know, it's what we found that allows us, the value curve allows us to blend and braid as much as possible, right? And leverage and co-create and bring everyone to the table. But man, does that take like leadership and courage to adapt with the community in real time? Like, you know, as agencies, we're supposed to, and mandated by federal law, in case you didn't know that, every 3 years we have to do a community needs assessment. We're doing a community needs assessment basically, like, I'm going to say on a quarterly basis, because we're just adjusting as the community need and as the opportunities kind of come our way to adapt the current, like, huge, you know, available resources to what our community needs. It's like living really in that real life, you know, response, because we're realigning, we are reassigning staff, we are reorganizing our structures pretty much like constantly. And I don't say this to brag in any way. I'm saying this is the fact, because in reality, in 2019, we were looking at a stretch budget of $50 million and 400 staff. Today, we are somewhere north of $300 million and approaching 900 staff for a fiscal year. That's crazy. So like many of you, we are under a tremendous amount of pressure to perform. And yet, while every day is hectic and, you know, nutty in its own way, we are not drowning, we are not crashing, we are not burning. And it is because we've become super focused on that regulative lens, focused on that collaborative lens. So when our ED of data says we cannot afford to have a single point of failure because we are the safety net, he's serious about it. So when we start feeling something's kind of coming undone, boom, we're focusing back on those issues. Anyone have examples of generative? I will just say one example I believe is generative from Wayne Metro side, and I'll turn it over to Liz and to Jen, is that, you know, we expanded by 200 people in like 18 months. And we know that in probably about 12 months, we'll have to retract to a more regular state at Wayne Metro. It'll be bigger, but it won't be like this big. But we are already kind of working on how do we take that capacity and hook it to the next big thing. You know, train people up, get them the credentials they need, because we're going to go 3 times as big with weatherization, and we're the 2nd largest weatherization provider in the country. So we got to get hippity skippity. Liz, what about you?
Before you flip over, I was just going to share that there's a lot of great examples in the chat. So I want to make sure that we're seeing them. Mia, if you want to kind of call some of them out, some people talked about advocating for a major plumbing repair program during the pandemic. Catherine had a question actually wanting to know, with the example that you just shared, Mia, is this easier with a larger group or smaller group? Yeah.
Meaning the training or to do the work, period.
And Catherine, feel free to go off mute to kind of clarify.
Yeah,
I think I was looking for, is it easier to be generative when it's an all hands? Yeah, when you don't have those siloed components.
I would say it's been much, I don't want to say easier. Easy is not a good word. It's been much more, you know, I would say quick expedient, because the resources are ample right now. And so it's, we're not like pounding and pounding. We're showing a data set, we're proving some outcomes, we're showing results, boom, the money comes. So I think it can work in any size. It can work in a small team, it can work as a large organization, but you definitely have to think about yourself as the kind of the central. We can't
Awesome.
get fully
And then I
staffed.
just see one more comment before Liz kind of starts. Cherish
Yeah.
shared that we can't get fully staffed, so things have to constantly change because we're always having to shift staff, and that it's pretty tough right now.
I would agree. If you are a regulative organization today, it's going to be hard because everybody's really good at one thing. And that is the value proposition that we held very true for a lot of years, because you get funding because you spend it correctly and you don't get dinged and the next set of funding comes along. What we're saying as an organization is we had to like pull all of that apart and kind of redesign and value engineer it into what was going to make sense for our community today. And by no means has this been an easy ride, but the value curve does make it possible in large and small teams. Does that answer your question, Cherish?
Yeah, it's just a matter of when you were talking about sort of the making the adjustments and, having to, adapt. It's tedious because, for some of our programs, there's only one person running
Right.
that program. If that person leaves, how do we maintain that program, those reports, and the running of that program when you only have one staff member? So yeah, and right now I think is a very big time of transition. At least we're finding that out here in Washington State that a lot of people are reevaluating their lives and work-life balance and trying to be competitive in the nonprofit and workforce realm overall. Is tough. And so trying not to overwhelm staff, I think, is another thing that we're trying to balance. So, but, always wanting to learn more tactics about what we can be doing to continue to serve our families, but also make the staff feel empowered as well.
Yeah, I mean, I could like point to tons of examples. I think maybe what we could do is we're working with the partnership right now on kind of pulling together best practices. There's learning groups, there's some mentorship, and so if we can be that open source and bring all of our stuff and just kind of lay it out and say pick and choose from which you believe is gonna help you and adapt it to what you're experiencing. We've kind of done the groundwork, and we can come together to kind of just share all the stuff that I think over the last few years have just been created. And we are not doing this ourselves. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you guys. Like we have had like some of the top organizations in the country come and help us. JP Morgan Chase, IDEO out of New York City, APHSA out of DC. Like we are not at this alone. We have like such strong thought partners, and a lot of it is philanthropy funded, and so we can also talk about that is not a short road either. But it is about getting on the path. It is about creating that, tying everything together. How do agencies start to make the shift? I'm going to throw this to Liz. What are the building blocks?
Yeah, so Mia, thanks for throwing it to me, but I think this is a great segue to our next section, because we're going to have a little bit of a small group discussion about how to start and what it looks like. And so I would say, let's come back to this question if we feel like this next next part doesn't address it. I wanted to just mention as a generative example that sometimes the thinking is just so far out of the box. I'm kind of even shy about mentioning this, but we've been talking at my shop about, so we work in really rural areas. There's a lot of trees and nature. And so we've been looking at Japanese Shinrin Yoku and just how we can lean on trees to help with therapy. And, that's like so different than making sure our, whatever funding report is turned in on time, and listening to experts who are really good at that, and working, with community members on building spaces for nature to help heal stuff while working on a bunch of other things too. So it's really fun, the kinds of magic I think that can happen as you lean a little bit more into generative spaces. And I feel like with the Community Action Network all across the country, as we all kind of start dreaming and scheming and planning and leaning into this, just like, I think that's where the true magic of what Sergeant Shriver and President Johnson and everybody else imagined all those years ago, when they said that this community action, partnering people who want to do well in their communities, working alongside people who are struggling in their communities, local governments, partners, everybody else, when we can kind of pull together, that's how we're going to end poverty. And so every time I talk to Mia and just get all of the updates, I'm just like, oh my goodness, it is so beautiful to just dream outside of the box and get working on things. But let's go to the next slide. And we will not lose this question about how do we start to make the shift. Jen, I want to pass this one over to you for staff leadership.
Sure. So another example that we are talking a little bit about is when we talk about leadership, right? So Mia and Liz did a great job already kind of providing examples of using the value curve, or the lens of the value curve, when you're looking at service delivery, when you're looking at work and program areas through community action agencies. Just another example, again, as Liz said, we'll transition to a little bit more stuff in a second. But when we look at or use the value curve, I've also used it to look at leadership roles, right? And so those that when as leaders, when we think about our work regulatively, as leaders, we're directive, right? So we ensure staff are clear about their expectations, their roles, their responsibilities, both task and relationship based within your organization, right? So Liz is responsible for this. I'm clear about this. I develop a job description. We're good at that kind of point or standpoint. As a collaborative leader, I'm connecting expectations to the bigger picture for staff, right? So having them see how they fit or how this new standard operating procedure fits or aligns with the values of our organization, or how this fits into part of the bigger whole or our bigger strategic plan. So they're not seeing each program, each project as individual silos, right? So I'm purposefully making those connections for staff. As an integrative leader, I'm adaptive. So looking for collective development, shared goals, strategies, innovations, and I'm using data and information to get there, right? I'm trying to really understand why and getting things through from that standpoint. And I'm flexing, right? So if I wanted to go someplace and it's not working well, and I'm knowing it's not working well because I have information gathered or data, I'm adaptive as a leader, going to try someone else, again, customizing to meet the needs of my staff in that standpoint. And then generative. As a generative leader, I am partnering and working with other leaders. So maybe other community-based organizations, maybe my friends at the state or health and human services organizations. I'm also working with competitors or those that I may be kind of trying to seek money with, together type of thing, because we're collectively looking for transformation and innovation within our community and within our system again. So it's not like each person for their own, it's that collective partnership to enhance the system and community. Thanks, Liz. Awesome. All right, so what we are going to do is that we are going to spend about 10 minutes in breakouts. And in your breakouts, you're going to just have conversations around your current role in the work that you do. And what do you think about your role or things that you do from a regulative standpoint? what are some of the things that you do that you would consider collaborative, integrative, and generative? So you have 10 minutes to talk about this in your small group. Tina's going to put the slide back on the first value curve slide that has kind of the service delivery pieces and the original definition, so people can have that as a focus. And at 1:31 Eastern time, so in 10 minutes, we will bring you back in and just have a brief conversation. So good luck, everyone. Awesome. And thank you, Peter, for starting the recording again. So I know you probably didn't get a chance to talk about everything, and the idea was honestly not to go in each of your roles in depth, but really just to be able to think through the lens of the value curve and think about something that you're super familiar with around the work that you do. So wanting to kind of open it to all of you, can one or two people share something that they talked about that they do as part of their role regulatively? So I encourage you to come off mic if one or two people want to share, please.
Hi, this is Deetsa from Wooden Wade from Massachusetts, and because I sit as a state CSBG administrator, that's one of the primary things. And I mentioned in our small group that one of the things that we see ourselves doing as part of this value curve lens is really assuring that agencies are able to really connect their community needs and strategic planning process to their CAP plan, so that it's really clearly understood and embraced in what they're doing, especially if they're making that shift with the whole, no wrong door or approach. And so for me, and coupled with having strong outcomes in the monitoring assessments, I think those elements and components are key from the regulative piece. But then, and I didn't get a chance to actually say this, but I also feel that when we know of agencies who are starting to make the shift, to be a partner with them as well, to help think, because no one owns the whole realm.
Absolutely. And that's a great example, Deetsa. And I would even challenge you and say a little bit more than regulative. You shared some great collaborative examples as well on how the different pieces align with CS. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else want to share one example for regulative?
In our group, we talked about evaluation, but it was difficult because Liz couldn't hear us. So we were trying to discuss through the chat, but we talked about evaluating data and how that leads to collaborative and integrative work.
Yeah, so really looking at it, I would say having the data or collecting the data would be the regulative piece. Using the data or the information gathered to make plans, changes, or so on would actually be integrative. So, but ensuring that there is a data component, that it's collected within your organization, that it's collected equitably, and all of that is absolutely regulative. Yes.
Yep. And that we're collaborating with others to ensure we're gathering the correct data that we need. Perfect.
So both of you shared great examples for regulative and collaborative. How about then, since we heard two of each of those, how about integrative? Does anyone share some great examples around how their role or what they do is from an integrative standpoint?
Catherine Riley Harrington, we are with you. It's easy to slip because that's what it all comes down to. The money, right? Like you have to get the money out the door. I totally get it.
And wanting to just share me a little bit, either you or I can read it for those that are on the phone so they know what Catherine's point would be helpful.
Got it. So Catherine mentioned that in her session that they came up that in smaller agencies and organizations, leaders are often bouncing between each lens, but the default always goes back to the regulative because you have to get money out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is kind of nodding as am I. And then the other question is from Catherine is anyone using a shared services model to help navigate? I can say we are, and I know Liz is. For sure. From a universal application on the website to really co-designing and like going into big, large funding proposals as either part of a funder collaborative where we are the funder or we are the fiduciary of the fund, or I mean there's just all these ways and we happy to show you, happy to talk more.
It sounds like someone else is part of a whole family approach learning cohort and working through the process to create a shared service model. So a lot of momentum, I think, in that direction.
Awesome. How about integrative or generative? Did any teams talk about anything that they may do from an integrative or generative lens?
Jen, when I think of generative, and Liz, when I think of generative, I think about the day that we walked in to this group. There were 5 organizations chosen, and we are and continue to be the 5 flagship organizations in Metro Detroit. Mm-hmm. We were competitors in the past. We played nice when we had to. Mm-hmm. There was always this kind of like, weirdness. And so we all came to the table, and to me, that is where that generative work really kind of took off, was when everyone kind of said, okay, this is what you're good at. This is what we're good at. This is what we need to be good. This is what our clients say that they're using you for. This is what our families say that they need you for, and let's design it accordingly. So to me, that just like hit me in the face that these 5 competitors are the people we should be competitors, are the people that are the organizations that we should be most aligned with.
You're absolutely right.
Yep.
And right. And so thinking about the services or programs from the perspective of the family or the individual, and, and how can you utilize each of your program areas, organizations, agencies, whatever strengths to build one program or service for families versus kind of competing and being okay, in essence, at delivering siloed programs or services for families. Absolutely. Awesome.
I think, I think that's a great story too, that goes back to this question that we had just before we went into breakouts. That was like, where do you even start to make the shift? What building blocks are necessary to make adjustments? What commitments were made by the agency to stay true? Was funding a major component to making the change? I think one of those building blocks is look at who are your competitors. How can we work together? I think that's a great example. I just want to share from my shop. We started thinking about, so our mission is upward economic mobility for folks. And so we wanted to go with a no excuses, like who isn't seeing that upward economic mobility? What's happening? What isn't happening? What's kind of, and that's where we started. And we always keep coming back to that question. Who are our services working for? Who are they not? And who needs to be at the table to help figure that out? It kind of helps with a collaborative angle, I think. Jen.
I was just going to transition us to the next piece. And kind of take us from there. We are going to go back into groups, and we are going to now talk about or use the lens of the value curve to talk about two specific program functions. And so if you are assigned an odd group, so 1, 3, 5, whatever, continuously, you are going to use the lens of the value curve to talk about family engagement. What are some of the things within that program area or functionality, or whole family WFA work that you all do through the lens of the value curve? And then if you are an even group, so the 2, 4, 6, 8, or so on, you're going to use the lens of the value curve to talk about either grant application, budget development, again, using the lens of the value curve. Eastern time again, it is 1:41. We will bring you back together at 1:51. Take it away, Tina. Right away, so I'm gonna.
So it's ready,
gonna,
yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna use that to.
And you want still the last slide?
I don't remember what that is. I want the regulative matters. Go to the next one. Yeah. Thanks. They're still talking if no one came back on their own.
Well, they'll all be back in 13 seconds.
Ooh. Tina, if you're doing something we can't see anymore, there you go.
Oh, sorry, I was getting the link for the playbook. So whenever you refer to the playbook, I'll put that in the chat, the link to the NCAP website playbook.
Hi, welcome back, everyone. We're just giving everyone another few seconds as they join us back. Okay, for my, I think it was my odd group for my family engagement group. Does anyone want to give an example, or one or two groups want to give examples of how you talked about family engagement or whole family approach using the lens of the value curve? Does one or two groups want to come off mic and share some examples?
Okay, this is Thelma French from Total Community Action. And we are a whole we were a member of the whole family community of practice. We're also a member of both the impact and the learning community. But our whole family approach is, we say, a little unique, but it's not unique. It's based upon our community need. We engage the family at any point. Our model is not based from child to parent. Often it's based from the parent through our workforce development or our reentry work, and then we enroll and engage the entire family. So conceptually, I think we are fully this is one of the few places where we are integrated, but we have a lot of growth to do. Like everybody else, we have to reassess. COVID has made some modifications to the model, but our theory of change is that we have to engage the whole family to be able to achieve our ultimate vision of our strategic plan, that there are pathways for every citizen to economic stability. And so our opening statement is, we count poverty in America by children, but children don't live in poverty alone. So we have to address the entire family.
Thank you, Ms. French. And I think one of the pieces I want to kind of highlight there is how you talked about how your agency for that program used information gathered in response to COVID, again, gathering information, making changes, recustomizing to where your families and community was that day and for their needs. And so awesome example of some integrative work that your agency was doing. Any other examples for those that were odd number groups around whole family or family engagement? So for me, and I'll just be real quick, you know, when you think about family engagement, getting the people at the table, right, could be your regulative. You identify who you're getting them at the table in the room, part of, you know, working together, then having them actually work together with you as equal partners. That's where the collaborative piece comes in. The integrative piece really then is looking at or continuously gathering information, monitoring, using data, customizing family experiences. So everyone coming through your program area is not getting the same services, supports, you know, working together. And then again, that generative, when there is that strong whole family approaches or whole family programs, family engagement happening, what's the bigger impact that's happening, right? Within your system, within your community? Are you developing family to family mentors, you know, that then is having that trickle down or effect at that standpoint? Last groups, my even number groups. So my budget or grant development. Give us some examples. What are some of the work areas that you talked about using the lens of the value curve? So my, what was it? My even number groups, my grant budget development. So group 2, what are some things that you all talked about for grant and budget development?
The difficulty when a lot of our funding coming in is regulated by our federal funders for, you know, specific programs.
Mm-hmm.
The difficulty of finding a way to ensure that a person doesn't have to bounce from program to program, or when your program is, one of our group members, their program is limited to certain ages, and even within that certain ages, certain groups, and how to make that a service available to, you know, that entire population rather than just a small portion of it, and looking at different funding sources so that we can you know, serve the full population and not make them go from, like at my agency, you know, I refer them, you know, I can introduce them, you know, I do my best to get them really connected with the people that might provide this other service.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's within our agency, you know, maybe not making them ping pong back between X, Y, and Z, if we can make that process easier for them, and just finding specific grants and funding that is not, that's more leaning towards the whole family approach, so we can have a general person or people to really get them connected with the services.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Liz. Oh, absolutely, right. And so having that funding there, having those set parameters from the feds, from the states, having those set kind of cost areas, knowing who can be or is identified as participants of each of those service or program areas are actually really good examples of regulative when you're looking at a grant application or budget implications. How about collaborative? Just one example from a group, not group 2, so group 4, 6, or 8, from a collaborative standpoint.
How you doing? This is Ivan Laney with UPO.
Hi, Ivan.
How you doing?
Good.
So we were using emergency rental assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And one collaborative approach that we use to get the funding out to the residents, we partner with apartment complexes and leasing managers.
Mm-hmm.
So what this entailed was that they had a trusted partnership with the leasing officers, which they identified days to where that we would provide mobile services on site, and they would do the applications for emergency rental assistance. They were processed.
Love it.
And then we also would either hand deliver the checks to the leasing office or the residents would pick it up. So that's one approach from a collaborative standpoint that I'll share.
I think that's a phenomenal example of kind of families come to get something one place and look at all the additional supports or services that they can access with at the same location. Kind of as we kind of hear all of you share some of these things, you know, I think there's a few points I want to hone in on. And the first really is that regulative matters, right? Regulative is not bad. That foundation is core. And you cannot, as a program area or an organization, progress to collaborative, integrative, generative unless you have that strong foundation. There'll be some things that never leave regulative, and that's okay. But just kind of looking to advance. Progression isn't always linear or uniform, right? So progression may move up the value curve a lot quicker in specific program areas and then not as quick in other program areas. And again, that's okay. Stages are mutually enforcing. So like I said, you have to have a strong foundation to be able to collaborate successfully. To look at data and use data to customize services for individuals and families, you have to be looking at more than one program area or more than one collaboration. And again, all of those things are critical or key to that generative lens or looking or having impact at the system and community level, again, because it means bigger than the family, bigger than self. And then finally, organizations, as you all shared, can be at multiple stages at the same time. So there definitely are units or program areas, again, that are progressing a little slower, that their work really fits within a certain area. And there's others that are going to kind of move along the way. They might already be at a more progressed level or lens using the value curve. And again, that is okay because it's not linear or uniform. Liz, just wanted to send it back to you for the last minute to wrap us up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Jen, and thank Mia, and thank all of the participants for joining us today. I wonder, as we kind of end here, if you could just put a thought in the chat about just how you're feeling now, or a word, or just something as we leave. I want to just, a tip someone gave me a while ago is just every once in a while, look at your day. Like if you need a place to start, just look at your day or look at your week and kind of keep track of how you're operating from a regulative, collaborative, integrative, generative space already. And that'll make it easier maybe to see how you start building from that. So inspired in the chat. So thank you all. Take care, have a good day. And the National Community Action Partnership is really committed to doing whatever they can, whatever we all can together to continue helping us learn and travel on this journey. So thanks to them for bringing us all together.
Thank you. And as we're all wrapped, we have 2 slides for me to share. So we just want to let you know that our Health Intersections convening is coming up. So here is the save the date for that. It's going to be May 5th. Hopefully, as many of you can attend. And we also want to thank our partners, the Kurski Foundation. So that is all that we have for today. We thank you for joining us, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.